Because you know what? Buyers smell desperation and they come to us as a law firm saying, oh my gosh, I have this buyer who wants to see our data room. What is that?
Today on the show, I have a friend and multi-exit entrepreneur, Jackie Dinsmore, on the show today with us. We're so excited to sit down with you, Jackie. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Krystyn. I'm excited to be here.
Well, let's dive into your not one, but three exit stories. And really, one of the things that struck from what we talked about was just how a lot of this was very deeply personal. One of them was a family-run business with your mother. And so we'll talk a lot about, kind of the personal side of this journey as well as the exit headlines. But digging more into your story, Jackie, you left a Bay Street firm, you left Blake's to become an entrepreneur. What was going through your mind at that time? And was there this sort of defining moment or feeling that kind of prompted you to take that leap into building?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. I love Blake's. It was a great experience for me. And sometimes life throws you, turns in the road, shall we say. And unfortunately, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. My mom and I are very, very close. And I was billing, thousands of hours a year at Blake's. And at the time, I just thought, you know what, this is kind of a bit of a God wink to maybe have a little bit of a change in my career. I didn't know she was going to survive cancer. And a job came up at Torstar, parent company of the Toronto Star, for me to work in-house there. And it was 4 days a week. And so the
Wow.
idea of being able to bring my mom to chemo on the fifth day was really appealing. And so that's what made me make the move. I don't know if I would have made the move because they were really supportive with me on Bay Street. And I felt like that at that time was my purpose. But
Yeah,
like you said, life throws you curveballs from time to time. And so that was the one that was thrown at me.
definitely. And a defining moment that completely changes how you view time and how you want to spend it and who you want to spend it with.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, you then went into business with your mom. Let's talk about that story. You went from a legal career to jumping into the world of direct to consumer retail, kids, apparel, Flapjack Kids. Tell us about the origin story of how you built that. And then, what an incredible moment to build something with your mother. What a personal moment to jump in, but also then to build together. What was the start of all that?
Yeah, it was great. So I spent about 8 years at Torstar, and then I was on maternity leave, and my mom had survived the breast cancer. And she said, I think we should start a business together. And from mom to mom, you'll appreciate, when they hand you a newborn and you're on maternity leave, that doesn't mean it's a break. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden,
No.
oh, great, this is a great time to start a business. But in a way it was because,
Yeah.
you're able to like you have that flexibility. So I
Yeah.
remember many a time going to meetings with, my children and carriers and things like that. And you can at least have that flexibility. But so we actually first started off with a handbag business. So my mom had thrown like 6 handbags in our suitcase and she'd come up with this idea for a convertible handbag. And we did a little prototype and it was called Lovely. It was actually named after my daughter. That kind of ended up morphing into FlapJackKids. Well, I'll tell you a little bit later, but it got me into that kind of entrepreneurial rhythm. And by the time I come back to Torstar, we were in about 250 stores. We'd won like the top 10 best products award in Canada. It had really taken off and it was really, really exciting. I actually had a little pop-up shop in my Torstar office and like my colleagues and other associates would come by and buy handbags.
Oh, I love it.
We were incredibly supportive. Like, it was really, really nice, and they knew that we had developed this. My mom and I had developed this on maternity leave. And then it got to a point where my mom was like, "I have to either shut this down, or you have to quit your legal job and do this with me."
Oh,
And so
defining moment.
really difficult decision to do that. And then for a bunch of reasons, handbags are a really intense capital business. So we kind of took that same kind of convertible, reversible concept and put it into Flapjack Kids, which was all reversible kids clothing. So that's that, what started here ended up over here, but became really a great success story. So it was a lot of fun.
And so I love this idea, and I think a lot of founders can relate to this, especially female women founders. When, you become a mom, your priorities change, you shift to then really become a mompreneur, like you're doing this kind of side of your desk, side hustle, as they say.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it becomes something that's gaining traction, and you're
Yep.
faced with this moment of, do I go all in? Do I leave this very safe space and do I jump? What what kind of as you're thinking about that moment and reflecting back on it, I know it's a few years ago, what was it that gave you the conviction to bet on yourself and bet on your family?
That's a really good question. I mean, I was very, very, very fortunate because I had a supportive spouse. And Jamie's a corporate guy. You've met him. He's a corporate
Yeah.
guy, and I'm the crazy entrepreneur, right? And what do they say about
Steady Eddie. That has been my steady Eddie all of my
opposites?
entrepreneurial life. Yeah.
Exactly. So opposites attracting and just a very different. So he was able to kind of hold the financial fort down while I did
Yeah.
all these crazy things. And
Yeah.
see, he supported me in it. So that really helped me take the leap, a leap of faith there.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky. I was one of the very fortunate ones that it worked out.
Oh, it's beautiful. And so the build story, you built. Walk us through kind of the moment from that pivot in your career, jumping out, doing this full time, diving into the build with your mother and the build from there to the exit. How were you thinking? What was sort of critical to that successful exit path for you?
Yeah, sure. Um, I mean, maybe I can kind of back up too a little bit because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, back when I started this business, they weren't teaching you in high school about entrepreneurship, right? You became a
Right.
teacher, a doctor, a lawyer. You fit in one of their boxes, right?
Yeah.
So you know, I was always that kid that was really, really excited about doing the family garage sale. So I think entrepreneurship was built in me from a very, very, very long
Yeah.
from being a kid. It was a gene that was really strong in me. So I think, even though I went the traditional path and went into law, that ended up being an amazing foundation for entrepreneurship for me. And
Yeah.
to answer your question, it ended up being a really great foundation in building the business.
Mm.
I didn't know what I was doing. Most entrepreneurs don't know what they're
Nope.
doing.
No, we do
Uh,
not.
but that was okay because I figured it out as long as I went along the way, and I built the plane as you were flying it kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I think for me, the law degree really helped me, kind of understand some fundamentals of business. And I was really not a typical lawyer in the sense that uh, I was somewhat of a risk taker. And so a lot of people would call me a non-lawyer lawyer, and I think that really helped me build the business to what it ended up being.
Yeah, and that is typically I am going to my lawyer for the downside protection versus thinking about the upside and the expansiveness of kind of where could this go? Where could this grow to? And so I love that you carry both because I do think as entrepreneurs, as founders, we are not necessarily the most what's the word risk averse, but we are risk tolerant and we're assessing risk every day and making choices and actually most importantly driving action to see this thing come to life.
Correct.
Walk me through sort of the moment when this exit idea came about. And for a lot of us listening, I myself included, thought an exit was a transaction. I never really understood an exit to be a phase of a business. The startup, the scale up, the exit. What was it like for you? What was the experience? What triggered it? Walk us through that moment, that phase.
Yeah, so I'll talk about FlapJackKids because that's probably the easiest and probably the most emotional for me being a family
Yeah.
business. My parents were aging, right? And they were my partners in the business, so it was my mom, my dad, my husband, and I. And we'd started talking about, like, what does that future look like? So when you have partners that are a little older, they don't have the runway that a 20-year-old does.
Yeah.
And we didn't know. We ended up selling FlapJackKids in 2019. Talk about another God wink because we didn't know what
Hmm.
was around the corner, which was COVID. And I don't know. I mean, a CPG company, the problem with a CPG company is it requires a lot of capital to buy product, right? To buy
And hold
products,
inventory.
old inventory.
Yeah.
And unlike a lot of CPG businesses, we were very brick and mortar heavy. So, like, one of our biggest customers was Indigo across the country. And so 95% of our business was brick and mortar. And we all know what happened in COVID with brick and mortar. It shut down for a
Yes.
good year, year and a half, even longer for some retail stores. And a lot of retail stores didn't make it. So we would have been kind of holding that inventory. So
Mm.
the timing couldn't have been more perfect. And I can talk about this a little bit later, but the buyer couldn't have been more perfect because he actually owned one of our factories and had been walking along our business the entire way.
Mm.
So, I'll talk a little bit about building relationships, but we had built a relationship with him And that's why it really worked out very, very well is because he knew our business, he understood our business, he believed in our business, and it was about the relationship, not the spreadsheet, if that makes sense.
It very much does, and there's 2 pieces here that I'd love to unpack. One on the timing and this belief that, we can control everything, when the reality is we can't control private capital markets.
Right.
But the second piece just is around, that building the relationship. And so something we work with our clients on is this belief of, okay, earlier days, if you have 2 years, for example, to build more value in your company, who are the strategic partners you can start to build commercial relationships that get to know because people buy product from people, but people also buy companies from people. And so that same idea, that same thread, what was that like? I mean, did you intend to build it that way? Did it kind of foster organically? How are you thinking about that relationship as it unfolded?
I mean, I think we always intended to sell it to someone because with the consumer products company, if you want to bring it to a $1 billion company or $1 billion brand or even, $100 million brand,
Yeah.
you do need capital and you do need partners in that. You can't do it as a small family business with 4 people, right? So we knew that an exit of some form was going to be down the road. So I think with the building relationships, I think it's important to build relationships with the idea that you want to exit, but also build relationships with the idea that they can introduce you to people that can help you exit.
Yes. Yes.
And at the end of the day, it all comes down to, the humanity and relationships and people and understanding people. It's not
Yeah.
about the numbers come into it, but in a lot of my experience, it's really about what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so then, that whole idea that it's a dance, as they say, it's more of an art than a science. Does that hold true from your experience?
It is. It does hold true, and I think keeping your eye on what people are doing. In this particular
Yeah.
case, the person that bought us, he had bought a few other brands. So I kind of was watching that, and I'm thinking, "I think I know what this guy's doing. He's gonna buy a bunch of brands and then create one overhead," right?
Mm.
So what ended up being really good for our exit when he purchased us was that, um, he had one social media. He had one social media convener, right? He had one warehouse. He was able to kind of combine that overhead so that all the different brands could benefit from that. And strategically, that's super brilliant because when originally all the
Yes.
brands were operating independently. And so we
Right.
were watching that. And then we just ended up being one of the brands who bought. So and in good news, I mean, my son's name is still on my photo is still on the website. Our story is still on the website. So
Oh,
going
that's
back to
cool.
kind of the buyer and the relationship, he's somebody that valued what we'd built. He didn't go in to just change everything. He still valued the story, and so like that cultural fit was just as important
That's
as the
beautiful.
numbers were.
And is that something if you're an entrepreneur listening and you're thinking about your exit, it's this whole idea of deal preferences versus a plan for your deal and how it's gonna go down. What advice would you have? Because, for example, my exit, we had an asset sale. I ended up having to sell, uh, the brand, all of the assets in the business, and I had to let my brand go. My brand was then dissolved. They ended up rolling it into the larger entity. And that's, when your identity is very tied to the story and the mission and the vision of what you created, it's a very challenging unwinding moment. What advice would you have for founders listening around how to think about your legacy and what lives on and that story post acquisition?
Yeah, and we were very lucky because this doesn't happen all the time, right? I've had other exits too, where you have a seat at the table, especially if you stay on. So not all founders
Right.
stay on. In all three cases, I stayed on, and sometimes you're like, I have this great idea, and they're like, that's great. Okay, we'll consider it. And then next thing you
Right.
know, they didn't take your idea. You're like, well, wait a second, that was a great idea. So
Right.
as an owner and a founder, you just implement your idea because you think it's a great idea, and you tell the team underneath you,
Let's
okay,
go.
we're doing this.
Yeah.
This doesn't happen when you get bought, right? And even with FlapJackKids, he's taken his own creative direction. He hired a new designer. I look at the
Yeah.
website from time to time, and they're different designs than what maybe I would have done. But
Hmm.
he also wrote me a check. So,
Right. Right.
you have to remember that piece.
So walk me through that for you personally. What is that like? What does that feel like? The check clears, bankers go away, or whoever was on your deal team. What does that experience look like when all of a sudden you see your bank account increase with sort of the measurable value of what it is that you created?
Well, it's different for everybody. So my friend wrote a book called The Success Hangover, Kelsey Ramsey,
Mm,
Kelsey
yeah.
Kitch. She's incredible, incredible founder. And not many people are feeling very sorry for you when you've had a check written to you, right?
It's a champagne problem, a
It's a
niche
champagne
problem.
problem. So after we sold Flapjack Kids, my mom was really sad. I mean,
Mm,
remember, she's 75. This will be the
yeah.
last kind of, she's not building another business anytime soon, right? This is probably the end of the road for her in terms of a career. She was a stay-at-home mom my entire life, so this was like her big bang, right?
Yeah.
And she was really sad. And a lot of
Yeah.
entrepreneurs go through depression,
Yeah.
right? So one of the things I've told a lot of entrepreneurs is when you're thinking about getting ready for a sale, whether you have your own therapist or whether you have your own support network or system or business coach or whatever, make sure you take care of yourself on the emotional side,
Yeah.
because it's more of a hit than a lot of people think,
Oh, yeah.
especially if you're the one that is continuing with the business. So in the case of Flapjack Kids, I continue with the business. My parents didn't, just for a
Mm,
transition period. And even in my current role, I'm the managing partner at Caravel. My two co-founders are no longer part of the business or the co-owners. So I'm the last woman standing, as they say, right? And that can feel, I'm not gonna say lonely because it isn't. I'm supported by an amazing team, but it can feel a little strange.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you have to kind of learn how to live in your new world.
What you said also is just really important around thinking about, if you look outside of your business today before you exit and you think about the relationships that you have, one of the things we work with folks on is around your community. Where is your community? Is the majority of your community in your job at work? If so, when you do transition out, you do go to the next thing, where are your people, right? Something as simple as that, just having that connection outside, building that life and integrating more life into the build when your head's down building your company. And I've lived the life where I had that exit. I did have to go through I don't think I would have called it depression, but I think now looking backwards, I think it was a depressive state where I was feeling this sense of who am I? Do I have any worth if I'm not a founder of this company? And you
Yeah.
realize you absolutely do. Especially when you become a parent, you realize you have so much worth. You are so much more than what you do. But it is such the success hangover. Kelsey, yes. Like that is absolutely a way to capture what that feels like. And so how do you, if you think back on that, how would you coach a founder on maybe preparing for that feeling? Is it something you can truly prepare for? Or do you really just have to go through it?
I think you have to go through it, but I also think you can prepare. So you had asked me a question a while ago about, a lot of entrepreneurs who are looking to sell are at a stage in their company where they're burnt out, they're tired
Yeah.
and exhausted.
Yeah.
And you have to take care of yourself first because you know what? Buyers smell desperation. And they
Yes.
also they can sense when someone's unhealthy, whether that is emotionally or physically or both, right?
Very
I
true.
always just tell people, make sure that you are healthy, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's with, your relationships, your friendships, your physical health, make that a priority
Yeah.
and make sure your business is healthy. I mean, the number of people who try and sell their business with they don't have a minute book and they haven't figured out their IP and they
Yep.
don't have shareholders agreement and they come to us as a law firm saying, "Oh my gosh, I have this buyer who wants to see our data room. What is that?"
Yes. Yes, and actually this happens so much when you've built something attractive, which, perceptively looking out and you're building it and you're scaling it, and you know what this feels like. You're running so fast, you're not documenting SOPs, you're not thinking about accountability structures, all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden you have the unsolicited buyer, the inbound inquiry. And I was speaking to a founder the other day who sold her company to Dropbox. They came in through the view of, we want to invest. It turned into very quickly an acquisition conversation. And at that moment, A, it's flattering. B, like if I'm in those shoes, I'm thinking, great, okay. And it's happening so fast versus taking a step back and going, hey, how might I run more of a competitive process? Is there like, right? And so just kind of pulling back, it's sort of interesting to me because it feels like this is partly why we exist. There's this lack of knowledge around that phase. Would you agree? Is this something you're seeing as well from your
Very much
perspective?
so. And for entrepreneurs who are not used to this kind of world, I try and give them some analogies that they are used to. think about, we've all sold a house, right? Think about if
Yeah.
you're going to go sell your house and your house looks all pretty on the outside and the buyer knocks on the door and you say, well, come on in. And there's clothes all over the floor and there's in the sink. And, the
A
buyer,
leaky faucet. Yeah.
yeah, the buyer knows that that can all get cleaned up. But what does it say about you as a
Yeah.
homeowner? Then the
Yeah.
buyer starts to go, well, wait a second. If they are so messy, have they really paid attention to, updating the electrical or like, is the roof, even good? And so then they start to question whether they even want to buy that house. Well, then they start to question, do they even really want to buy that business? Because this entrepreneur has not got their crap together.
Exactly. Well, and then to further that analogy, I love that analogy. Thinking about, would you sell your own home if you wanted to maximize the value of your home? Would you sell it directly or would you run more of a bidding war? Which I know we all hate this in Canadian real estate, but right. And so further to that, it's thinking through that process, but it's also thinking about value creation, right? So instead of thinking about your business as like, I've got a P&L, it's thinking about, okay, I want to put in a kitchen reno because I think the kitchen reno is going to lead to 3x the value of my home or whatever you think you're going to get back. And so it's a very systematic way of building. It's a little bit different than if you're just building a lifestyle business, which we've discussed this.
Yep.
Wonderful, great. And then it's a beautiful choice, right? And it's a choice to build a more valuable version of your business. If you look at kind of the 3 exits that you had in just under a decade, which by the way, I think 3 exits in under a compressed timeline. So you have Cognition, Caraval, FlapJackKids. When you think about kind of the early days, did you think you would be known for someone who has had, the multi-exited entrepreneur? Was that ever something that you thought would be part of your identity? And I say that carefully because we are not what we do, but part of your story, perhaps.
Not at all. Like, not at all. I did a
Yeah.
psychology grad, right? Like, I would hear about stories about people doing that and going into business
Yeah.
and gonna be entrepreneurs. That was not my track. I wanted to be a lawyer for the deaf community because my aunt and uncle were
Yeah.
deaf, and I wanted to help the deaf community and be a lawyer for them. And then I decided, okay, well, if I can't do that, maybe because I knew sign language to a certain extent, well, maybe I'll be a criminal lawyer. And then I won the family law award in law school. I won the family law award. So then I'm like, well, maybe like I am so off the
I
beaten
love
path
that.
of what I was supposed to be doing. And now I look back, and a few people have asked me this: do you wish you had done your MBA? Do you wish you had done commerce at Queen's instead of psychology? Absolutely not. Sliding doors. If you've ever seen that movie, it's one of my most favorite
Yes.
movies with Gwyneth Paltrow,
I
right?
was
You
yes.
you don't know what door is gonna open when, and I would never change. I love how my path led. It was just a really windy path and not straight like a lot of folks think it would be.
But it sounds like there's this through line of curiosity of exploring the kind of the what if, the build versus the risk reduction kind of mindset, the creator versus just the consumer. I'm curious for you, when you think about your mindset and mindsets change and evolve, was there a way you were thinking that has helped you get to this moment?
I think I was going back to kind of my earlier comment of being like loving the garage sales thing. I
Yeah.
love sales. Love
Yeah.
sales. It's like the thrill of the hunt, right? It's
Yes.
the win. And in all of my businesses, that's been core and center of it. Now, I'm not saying all successful entrepreneurs have to love sales. That just happens to be my skill set and my love.
Yeah.
But, when you get off that phone, and my mom was the same way. I remember she got off the phone, like it was with one of our big companies that we ended up selling to. And she's like, I got it. I got the sale. And
Oh,
and
it's
that
huge.
reward is incredible. It was
Yeah.
way bigger, I think, than any other profession could give me. But that's just me.
Yes.
Other
Yes.
folks get rewards in their professions in other ways. I have my high school friends, most of them ended up being teachers, and their reward is, that they can get their grade 1 student to read a paragraph.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Yeah.
right? It so happened that what drove me was I just love being able to get the sale in the door, and that's what helped me build the companies, right? At the end of the day, that's what builds an exit is, revenues. So,
And build it to sell. And I will say that every founder, and I've met with a few, including our clients, if they're listening, who will not say that they are salespeople.
right.
Meanwhile, I will challenge that directly because I think everyone has this idea of kind of like the this car
Money.
salesman sort of
Yeah,
person. But
Yeah.
if you are able to persuade someone enough to take your idea from a PowerPoint deck to a product to the market, to build a team, to rate, like that is sales, that is storytelling, that is connecting pain to a solution and creating value, right? So I would say we are all salespeople or have to be.
Well,
Otherwise you're cooked.
and if you have to just start going and selling vacuum cleaners door to door, then I don't love sales that much.
Yes, no.
I have to love what I'm selling.
Yes,
I have
and
to
believe
be
in it.
invested in the idea and believe in it. Um,
Wholeheartedly agree.
and my husband's often said, "Oh, well, you should go, it's the earlier days, like you should consider working for like a technology company and selling software." I'm like, I don't know. So that's why it kind of worked for me because with Flapjack Kids, it was a product that I believed in. My mom and I created, it had my kids' names in it. It was, I could get behind it. And then in the legal world, I wanted to disrupt and revolutionize the legal world. So I'd been on the other side of the buying table. I'd been an
Mm.
in-house counsel. I'd been an entrepreneur that absolutely hated lawyers and got frustrated with them. So I'm like, oh my gosh, here's an opportunity for me to really disrupt that industry and make it better for entrepreneurs and
Oh,
lawyers. And so
powerful.
I even still get excited talking about it, right? Which
I can see, I can feel it. We're not in the physical room together, but I can feel it. And actually on that note, I wanted to ask, did those 2 exits feel different? Selling a professional services firm, what was different versus selling more of a direct to consumer or, retail, brand?
Well, I mean, from a structural perspective, it was different because I was more of a minority shareholder in those two other deals, and thankfully, I had co-owners who did a lot of the heavy lifting on the deals. So I
Nice.
got to I was in the room and got to be a part of it, but I got to watch and observe and see them lead. On Flapjack Kids, I had to kind of do the entire thing from soup to nuts. So that's what made it very different.
Yeah.
And I mean, both professional services and consumer products have their pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about inventory, and
Yep.
professional services don't have to worry about that. But at the same time, you know what the inventory for professional services is? Humans. And you know what's
Yes.
unpredictable? Humans.
Yeah. Yes, I can say that from experience. And from a buyer perspective, when you think about the diligence questions you were seeing, did you see any that were like major red flags for anyone who has an agency or services firm that might be listening? What should they be thinking about?
I mean, obviously, they cared about our culture. I think
Yeah.
culture is really, really important because when you're dealing with humans, they want to make sure that those humans want to stay because that's really
Yes.
what your value is, right? And we didn't want to be just a body shop. I mean, one thing that we said about Caravel that really was different was, yes, we brought on like 1 in 42 lawyers, so we were really, really
Yep.
picky there, and we had a really kind of unique overhead model where we didn't have kind of the mahogany panel boardrooms and the fancy artwork, and so we made it the pricing more available, but then also technology, right? So we were really forward thinking in technology long before this legal tech explosion and the world of
Mm.
AI. So we when we were selling, we couldn't be just about the bodies, right?
Right.
You have to
Right.
be more than that because if you're just about if you're only about the people you have, people come and go, right?
Yeah.
And so what have you really built that is more than just that? Thankfully, like our attrition is really, really small. And I think the fact that we had such great people really helped us on our exit.
And so if you think about your pitch book, if you were to take those to market again or someone else, if they're thinking about and one of the extras we actually do with clients is we give them a draft kind of SIM confidential information memorandum, pitch book, which is what you're going to be going to market with in a sale process. What would it have said in terms of like high level metrics that you think buyers of professional services firms are looking for?
Well, I mean, our buyer had bought 3 firms in the US, and we
Yeah.
were the first one to buy in Canada. So people think that like folks are really just looking um at the spreadsheets, but they're not, right? They're looking
Mm,
culture, they're looking at strategic fit. They're looking
mhm.
at like sometimes you could have, hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, but if you don't fit within their strategic plan, then they're not buying you, right? So
Yeah.
it's not all about the spreadsheet. So, I can't say that I can get in the heads of the private equity firm that bought us and why they did necessarily,
Mhm.
obviously, and behind closed doors for the most part, but I'd like to think that they were really buying a movement, right? They
Hmm.
saw a need in the legal world, and so they bought 3 firms in the US, they bought us in Canada, And we've been really lucky to have a supportive PE firm that sees the vision, right?
Mm.
And it's not just about the check that they get from flipping it in 3 to 5 years, which we talked about. It's about the vision and really building something that means something.
That's beautiful. Buying the movement. I think just even thinking holistically beyond a service model, a billable rate, et cetera. You're thinking holistically about the value proposition, about the ideal client profile. And also, I'm sure, I've been on the buy side in an operating role on a services firm, and you're looking for client fit, you're looking for pipeline, you're looking to kind of assess the quality of that pipeline. But then beyond those numbers, to your point, you're going, yeah, what is their culture? What is their way? How do they build? What are their kind of their meetings, their rituals, all of that? And how might we integrate? Because you're absolutely right. People are actually quite quite challenging. Numbers are very easy to get right. But numbers are math. People do not math. There's so many other variables, and that's what makes us human, I suppose,
Right?
and
Well,
beautiful.
and you bring up an interesting about integration, right? I think the
Mm,
real work is in the integration afterward, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And we
Yes.
talked about this. I think the real reason deals close is because of the trust in the relationship, right? About
Yeah.
relationships again. And then the cultural and strategic fit. Again, it's
Yes.
not about the spreadsheet. I think too many entrepreneurs, and I'm not saying you don't pay attention to your financials, 100% you should,
Yeah.
but there's more than just, hey, like, look at what we've done in revenues this year.
Yes. Yes.
These are
Exactly.
all the other elements and pieces that have to come together to make sure that the actual check ends up in your hands.
100%. Yeah. And just on that note, just in terms of the intangibles, right? And this is where a lot of folks typically think of their value purely through the lens of what is my P&L? What is my profit? What is my EBITDA, which is what most businesses are, especially in services, are valued off of. Um, but this idea of brand love, what is my NPS score? Tracking more of the things that you say. We say that we are the most beloved firm, for example, in this specific niche. Do you have the data to prove it? Do you have something that I can look at to build confidence and conviction that that is what they say? And so I'm curious, just in terms of the intangibles, as you look at businesses now as an investor, as you look at businesses who are on their scale up journey, how does your mindset now approach from a buyer perspective, from an investor perspective, looking at companies?
Yeah, I mean, I love that, right? I always say kind of a bit of a phrase that I like to invest in the jockey, not just the horse. So I spend a
Oh,
lot of time with the founder, right?
I like it.
Again, back to relationships, back to people. The horse is really important because you're not going to win any races if the horse can't run. But if the jockey is no good, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter how good the horse is, right? So
Mm,
I pay a lot of attention to the jockey. I mean, some of my deals took a year or longer to close, right?
mm,
Because it was getting to know each other, dinners and
yeah.
lunches and things like that, right? It's really getting to know who you're investing in. And even if the founders are long gone after that, they're the ones that have established the culture. They've established everything that you're buying. So
Yeah.
if you don't agree with that and you don't align with that, then why would you ever buy that, right?
And to
Uh,
that point about just who the founder is, are you looking at, their values driving decision make like what kind of attributes are you thinking about as you're getting to know someone?
I mean, there's the soft ones, right? You can tell
Yeah.
if somebody's transparent,
Yeah.
authentic, deals
Yeah.
in with integrity, right? I mean, my dad told me a long time ago, go on a golf game with them and see if the person lies about their score. But we laugh, but you know what?
Yes.
If you're gonna lie about your score in a golf game, what are you gonna do in your business, right? And
Exactly.
so there's all
When the
those,
stakes are higher. Mhm.
right? So there's all those soft skills. Obviously, I love to see somebody with initiative. Maybe my kids have hardened me on this, but I don't like to be ghosted ever.
Mm.
And like I'll text my kids, if they don't text me back, I lose my mind. You can imagine how it must feel as somebody who now is on the investing side when a founder doesn't respond to me. And I'm not saying they need to respond to me in like 5 minutes, but when 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours goes by and there's no out of office, so they're not on vacation, you start to wonder, okay, well, clearly I'm not somebody that is a priority in their lives. And maybe they're not willing, maybe they don't want to exit because if they can't answer my email, then I guess that's not important to them right now, right? And I'm not saying that, it's like I'm supposed to be the most important person in their life right now, but I just think it's respect, and I think
Yeah.
we've a little bit of it that a little of that over the years that, maybe it's just the number of emails people get and just the noise, but be responsive. I was just dealing with a friend's daughter today, and it's not age related because she's 21, and I got an email in 3 minutes from her when I offered to introduce her to another colleague who was looking for somebody in the investment banking space, and
Amazing.
that alone impressed me beyond belief, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I think we can't lose sight of, the relationships, the intangible things that make us human and make us really believe in businesses. I
Mhm.
think most folks have got the tangible stuff down, right? Like, you
At
gotta
that stage, totally. You've
yes,
scaled, you built something of value. But I
right.
I love this idea just and it's the soft stuff, but those are often the hard things right now, especially. And this idea of the fundamentals of relationships and of building connection, especially when you're thinking about does this person have the executive function to be organized enough to manage a high priority initiative like raising money or exiting their business. And I think it's a really good reminder for entrepreneurs who I do empathize. There's a lot going on often, but just to start to really check how you're spending your time pre exit well in advance, take stock of where your time is going and making sure that it's allocated appropriately towards a high priority investor conversation, for example. So
Yeah,
I'm with you on that.
and if I could bundle it, like, if I had to bundle it into kind of like we could talk about this all day long,
Yeah.
right? Like, bundle it into kind of 3 big takeaways that have been important to me. I would say, relationships matter more than pitch decks, right? And people lose sight of that. I would say, take care of yourself first.
Mm,
A healthy founder is a founder that people are interested in exiting. And when I say healthy, I mean holistically in every
yeah.
way. And then, run your business as if due diligence starts tomorrow,
Mm, yes.
right? And keep running your business. We talked about this. Keep running your business while the deal negotiations are happening. It's not that's not when you stop.
No.
Anything, that's when you have to keep getting better and better because I see deals fall through 90% of deals, or I'm not gonna quote the exact number, but many deals fall through.
Yeah.
And so if you've let your business go during that time, it's pretty hard to recover.
If you're not growing, you're dying,
Oh, that's good. That's
right?
good. And if
Totally with you.
you're not changing, you're choosing.
Ooh, yes. Yes. No, I love that. And it is a lot of this is a series of choices. That's what strategy is at the end of the day. Choices that guide action and perpetual action compounds over time. And eventually you get to your destination, wherever you choose it to be. And on that note, just thinking about the entrepreneur who's listening, who's thinking about an exit or they have the exit on their list, they're starting to think about what do I do with this asset that I've built? Is there a practical step if you were to sort of say, hey, here's one action you could take today to get closer to that goal? What would you say to them?
Um, I mean, not to be repetitive, but I think it's build your community, build your relationships, build your people, right? Like
Yeah.
you never know how many times have you and I been invited to an event and we're like, "Ugh, I don't feel like going to that event," right? We all feel that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But it's funny. I could probably tell you there were several events I've gone to where I've met people that have turned into relationships that have led me to some some success in some way, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, you know, just just uh, just go and do it. Go and do it. Go and meet people. Keep people in your circle. Keep the right people in your circle. You know, help people when they ask for help because you never know when they're going to be in your corner later. And build those relationships because I relationships matter more than pitch decks. And I think that's gotten lost amongst entrepreneurs sometimes. And so I'd love to see that be brought back.
I love that. Be open, be curious, be relational, and build with that in mind. Jackie, thank you so much for joining us on the pod. Appreciate you.
I appreciate the opportunity. It was a lot of fun. Thanks so much, Kristen.
Awesome. Thanks, Jackie. This podcast brings you conversations with founders who've made strategic exits, plus the advisors who guided them through the entire journey. before, during, and after the deal. Real expertise from people who've actually been there. Getting to the Deal is made for the Exit Horizon community, a private, highly vetted membership for Canadian entrepreneurs planning strategic exits. We discuss what most won't, how to maximize value, build systematically, and design what comes next. Connect with us, Exit Horizon, on LinkedIn, or reach me at Krystyn@exithorizon.com. I'm Krystyn Harrison. Subscribe to Getting to the Deal wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next week.